in the heart of the lush kingdom of Niru, where the rivers whispered to the trees and the mountains guarded secrets older than time. The people celebrated a rare occasion. The royal palace, usually a fortress of quiet dignity, burst into a flurry of joy and preparation. Queen Amara, beloved wife of King Kamau, was in labor. It was said that Queen Amara had been barren for years. Herbalists, priests, and spirit callers had tried everything. Hope had begun to fade. But then when the moon hung low and red in the sky, one rainy night she conceived. The people called the unborn child a miracle, a gift from the ancestors. The royal hut was dimly lit by oil lamps and burning incense. The queen lay on her side, drenched in sweat and pain, surrounded by skilled midwives and wise women who whispered chants. Her face, once serene and strong, was twisted in agony, but in her eyes burned the fire of a mother determined to bring life into the world. Then the cry of a baby pierced the night. A son, one of the midwives shouted joyfully. "A strong boy, Your Majesty." Relief washed over the queen's face. She reached weakly toward the child, her arms trembling. But before she could hold him, the midwife's face grew pale. Her hands moved urgently back to the queen's stomach. "There's another," she gasped. Gasps filled the room. "Twins?" A second cry followed moments later, weaker, smaller, but clear. Another boy. The midwives froze. One turned to the eldest of them, Mama Ngozi, whose face held not joy but dread. This is a sign," she whispered. "Twins in the royal bloodline, ... Everyone in the room fell silent. For generations, Niru had followed a prophecy. It was believed that twin sons born into the royal family would bring ruin. Two suns cannot rise in the same sky. The ancient scrolls told of chaos, division, and war if the throne ever belonged to two. King Kamau was summoned immediately. A tall, regal man with braided hair and a thunderous presence. He entered the room expecting joy. Instead, he found his queen pale, her arms empty, and the midwives kneeling in silence. "They are twins," Mama Ngozi said grimly. "Two boys." The king stared at the crying infants, his jaw tight. Then he looked to the queen. "We cannot let both live in the palace," he said coldly. "You know what the elders will say? The kingdom must never know." Queen Amara's eyes welled with tears. She turned her head toward the smaller child, the second-born, whose cry had softened. "No," she whispered. "They are both mine." "Then one must be hidden," Mama Ngozi said. "If the people find out, it could tear the kingdom apart. But if one is taken away tonight, no one will ever know." The decision fell like a blade through Amara's heart. Her cries were not louder than the storm that now raged outside. She was queen, but in that moment, she was just a mother helpless against fate. In the dead of night, the younger twin was wrapped in soft cloth and carried out of the palace in silence. The midwife entrusted with the task, a woman named Leela, was sworn to secrecy. She was given gold, a false name, and instructions to leave the kingdom and never return. She vanished into the jungle as rain soaked the earth, holding the sleeping child close to her chest, back in the palace. Only one cradle remained. The next day, Nuro celebrated the birth of a Prince Subari, strong and destined for the throne. No one outside those walls would ever know that another child had been born, a boy named Jabari, the king's twin that nobody knew. Years passed. In the grand palace of Nuro, Prince Subari grew like a flame kissed by the wind bolt, beautiful and destined. His skin gleamed like polished bronze, his eyes sharp like a hawk's. From the age of 5, he was trained in swordsmanship, debate, and the wisdom of the ancestors. The entire kingdom praised him as the future of the throne. Servants bowed when he passed. Elders prophesied his greatness. Festivals were held each year to celebrate his birth. He was raised with everything except the truth. He had no idea that on the night he was born, another had come into the world beside him, far away. Deep in the emerald hills of a quiet village called Duma, a boy named Jabari grew up among farmers and hunters. He had no title, no royal silk, and no golden crown. But he had something else spirit. Even as a child, Jabari was different. While other boys played with wooden animals, he carved spears. While others napped, he wandered into the forest, listening to the wind and the whispers of the trees. The woman who raised him, Leela, the midwife turned exile, never told him the truth. To him, she was just Mama Layla, a gentle healer with wise eyes and a sad smile. He asked once about his parents. She had only replied, "You were born on a stormy night, child. The gods gave you to me, and that's all that matters." But Jabari's dreams told him otherwise. He often woke drenched in sweat after seeing flashes of gold, a throne made of lion bones, a crown hovering above two identical boys, and fire. Always fire. In the palace, Zuberi never had such dreams. He dreamed of war and conquest, of banners waving with his name. He loved the sound of his own voice echoing through the halls. Yet something gnawed at his soul. He never felt complete. He couldn't name it, but deep within, there was a whisper, a chill that even the sun could not melt. On Jabari's 15th birthday, a strange event occurred. He was walking back from the river with 2 fish in his hands, when a woman, visiting the village from the capital, gasped and dropped her basket. "You?" she stammered, staring at him. "You look exactly like—" "No, it's not possible." Jabari stepped back. "Like who?" "Like Prince Zuberi," she whispered. "You could be his shadow." Words spread quickly. Whispers turned to murmurs. Murmurs became rumors. Within days, the village elders summoned Leela. She stood trembling before them, silent, when Jabari confronted her. She could no longer hold it in. "I should have told you long ago," she said, her voice cracking. "You were born into fire and fate. You have a brother, a twin, a king." Jabari sat still, thunder cracking in his chest. "Why was I hidden?" "Because the world feared you," she said, tears falling. "Because they believed you were the curse, but I believe you are the balance." He didn't speak for hours. That night, he returned to the river, not with a fishing net, but with a heavy heart. And in the capital, Prince Zuberi felt a sudden jolt of unease. He stood before his mirror, staring at his face, and for the first time, he thought he saw a stranger looking back. 2 lives, 2 paths, 1 truth. The storm that had been buried 15 years ago was rising again, and this time it would not be silenced. The journey to truth often begins with a whisper, then grows into a storm that no one can silence. After learning the secret of his birth, Jabari felt like the ground beneath him had cracked open. For days, he barely spoke. Lila watched him with quiet pain in her eyes, knowing there was nothing more she could do. The truth had been given. The rest was up to fate. But fate had already begun to stir. Word of Jabari's existence traveled through the markets and alleys of the capital like wind through dry grass. Most dismissed it as drunken gossip. But inside the palace, a few old servants remembered. One in particular, Rue. The queen's former handmaid heard the whispers and felt her blood run cold. She remembered that night. The storm, the silence, the second cry. She had kept the secret buried for 15 long years, living with the guilt of helping hide a royal child. But now, as her days grew short and her bones brittle, she couldn't ignore the signs. The gods, she believed, were speaking again. And they were not finished. Jabari, determined to understand who he truly was, decided to travel to the capital. He disguised himself in a trader's robe and joined a caravan of spice merchants. Lila begged him not to go, but he looked her in the eyes and said, "I need to see what I was denied. I need to see him, my brother." When Jabari entered the city of Nuru, it felt strangely familiar. He walked its streets like someone waking from a dream. Every alley, every fountain, every stone wall seemed to call out to him, and the people, many of them, turned their heads and stared. Some gasped. Others whispered behind their hands, "He looks just like the prince." Impossible, but the eyes. Jabari tried to ignore them, but deep inside, something was stirring memories that weren't his, and yet were. Sights that felt like déjà vu. The city felt like home, even though he had never been there. One night, while wandering near the palace gates, Jabari was approached by a cloaked woman. "You don't belong out here," she said softly. "But your face, I have seen it before." She pulled back her hood. "I served your mother," she said. "Queen Amara, I was there the night you were born." Jabari's breath caught. "I've been waiting for the day you would return," she continued. "And now I will show you what they buried." She led him through hidden paths and servant tunnels, deep beneath the palace. Finally, they arrived at a small chamber sealed with stone carvings and dusted with time. Inside was an ancient artifact in obsidian mirror surrounded by bones and symbols. "This is the mirror of truth," Io whispered. "It shows not what we see, but what is." Jabari stepped toward it. His reflection shimmered, then began to shift. In the glass, he saw two boys born in the same moment. One wrapped in silk, one in cloth. One raised in glory, the other in shadows. He saw Queen Amara weeping, King Kamau turning his back, the midwife fleeing into the storm. The mirror showed it all, his whole life, stolen before it began. Tears streamed down Jabari's face. Then the reflection changed. Now he saw himself and Zuberi standing face to face. But behind Zuberi was fire, destruction. Behind Jabari, peace, unity, and balance. "The prophecy," Io said, voice trembling. They misread it. The twins were not a curse. They were the cure. The kingdom needs both. Suddenly, the chamber door creaked. Jabari turned, heart racing. Two guards stood in the entryway, weapons drawn. By order of the king, one said, "You are under arrest for treason and impersonating royalty." Ao stepped forward, arms raised. He is royalty. The guards hesitated, but grabbed Jabari anyway. As they dragged him away, Jabari's eyes locked onto the mirror one last time. The reflection still showed the two brothers. But now they were walking toward each other, not away. The truth had been seen. But in the palace above, lies still ruled. And King Zuberi was about to learn that he was not alone in the bloodline. The palace of Nuru, with all its golden pillars and painted ceilings, had never felt so cold. News of the mysterious prisoner who looked like the king spread like wildfire. Though the guards were ordered to stay silent, but servants whispered. Ministers speculated. And in the hidden corners of the palace, fear began to rise like smoke before a blazed dot in his private chamber. King Zuberi stood before his own mirror, staring deeply into his reflection. The words of his closest guard echoed in his mind. "Sire, the prisoner. He bears your face." He had dismissed it as nonsense, an impostor, a trick, a rebel with dreams too big. But then came the second whisper from the high priest of the temple, an old man who had served under 3 kings. "Your Majesty," he had said, trembling the prophecy. "The one your father feared." It spoke of 2 born of one womb, one hidden, one crowned. If the hidden returns, the crown must choose between destruction or truth. Zuberi tried to shut it out. He was the king, the chosen one, the only son. But doubt now crept where pride once stood. Down below, In the dungeon, Jabari sat in chains. His face bruised, his spirit battered, but not broken. Ao had been locked away as well, accused of sorcery and treason, but neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The truth had already begun to seep into the cracks of the palace walls. Days passed. Then Queen Amara summoned her son. She was frail, her once powerful voice now soft and slow. "Zubiri," she said, looking at him with eyes full of sorrow. "I've kept this from you far too long." Zuberi sat beside her, feeling a heaviness in the air. "You had a brother." She said the words felt like stones crashing through glass. "A twin, you were born moments apart, but the elders feared. The prophecy, your father ordered him taken away. I wept. I begged. But I was queen, not God. I had to choose, and I chose. Survival." Zuberi stared at her, his heart shattering. "Why didn't you tell me?" "'Cause I was afraid," she whispered. "Afraid of what you'd become? Afraid of what the truth would break." Zuberi rose from the bedside, trembling with rage, betrayal, and confusion. That night, he went down to the dungeons. He stood before Jabari's cell and stared at the man who looked exactly like him, same face, same height, same voice. The silence between them was louder than war drums. "I suppose you hate me," Zuberi said. "I don't even know you," Jabari replied, his voice steady. "But I know you're not my enemy." Zuberi clenched his fists. "You came for my throne. I came for my truth." Zuberi paced, the walls of his world crumbling. "Do you think you could lead this kingdom?" he asked bitterly. "Where? The crown? Sit on the seat I bled for." Jabari shook his head. "I don't want your throne. I want peace. I want to end the lie that cursed us both." Zuberi stared at him, this man, this stranger, this brother. For a moment, he saw not a threat, but a reflection. Not a rival, but a part of himself that had been missing all along. But before he could speak, a door burst open. General Bashiru, the head of the king's army, stormed in. His face was pale. "Your Majesty," he said, "there's unrest outside. The gates, the people have heard. Villagers are chanting in the streets. They want answers. They want him." Bari turned back to Jabari. "This kingdom. It's shaking." "Yes," Jabari said. "Because it was built on a lie." Queen Amara, lying in her chamber, breathed her last breath that same night. The kingdom mourned her, not knowing that with her died the last thread of the old order. Now, the truth was rising, and the kingdom of Nuru stood on the edge of a blade. The sun rose over the kingdom of Nuru, but it brought no warmth. The streets were filled with anxious crowds. Whispers of revolution drifted from market stalls to palace walls. Villagers, nobles, and warriors all waited for the king to speak. None knew what he would say. Inside the palace, Zuberi stood alone in the great hall. He wore his golden robe, but his heart felt heavier than armor. The crown on his head had never felt so tight. His kingdom was crumbling not because of war or invasion, but because of the truth, and the truth had a name. Jabari from the high balcony. Zuberi looked down at the people gathering in the courtyard. He saw banners. He heard chants. Tay. Not just for him, but for the brother, the forgotten son, the true twin. He closed his eyes. That morning, he had sat with Jabari in the garden, away from guards, away from politics. "You could take everything from me," Jabari had said. "I don't want your everything," Jabari replied. "I want my beginning." The words struck like thunder. The silence between them had stretched for a long while. Then Zuberi asked the question that mattered most. "What do we do now?" And Jabari had answered, "We do what they never did. We choose peace." Now, standing before the gathered kingdom, Zuberi raised his hand. The crowd fell silent. "My people," he began, his voice echoing across stone and sky. "You know me as your king. You have served me, trusted me, but I have not given you the full truth." He paused, letting the weight of what came next settle. "On the night of my birth, a second son was born. My brother. My twin." Gasps filled the air. Some clutched their chests. Others fell to their knees. He was hidden, cast out by fear and by the old laws. But those laws were wrong, and the lie has cost us all. The guards brought Jabari forward. He stood beside Zuberi, dressed not in royal robes, but in the clothing of a humble man. "This is Jabari," Zuberi said. "He is of my blood." "Of your blood? He is not a threat. He is the truth." A ripple moved through the crowd. Some shouted in joy. Others stared, unsure. But no one moved against him. "I will not fight my brother," Zuberi declared. "I will not let pride destroy what fate tried to give us balance. From this day forward, we rule together, not as king and challenger, but as brothers, as servants to the people." Suddenly, the palace gates opened. Elders stepped forward. Warriors laid down their spears, and the people began to chant not for one king, but for two. Later that week, the royal council voted to change the law. The throne would no longer belong to blood alone, but to wisdom, to unity. To the will of the people, Zuberi and Jabari were crowned side by side, not as kings of each other, but kings of peace. They turned the throne into a shared seat. They turned a palace of secrets into a house of healing. They turned a kingdom built on fear into one built on truth. And though many songs would be written and many scrolls inscribed, none captured the story better than the name the people gave them, the twin kings who chose peace. And so the story of a hidden birth became the story of a kingdom reborn. And it began, as all great stories do, not with war, but with a choice to forgive, a choice to lead together, a choice to tell the truth. Thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. If you watched till the end, please comment "end" so that we could understand you were with us till the end. As well as, please let us know, where are you watching from? Before leaving, please hit the subscribe button, comment your thought, and share with your nearest and dearest one. See you in the next one. Until to the next one, stay happy. Goodbye.